America is about to lose control of its own money. Yesterday, while cameras were off, crypto executives and bank lobbyists walked into the White House to break a deadlock that's freezing a major bill in the Senate. Officials called the talks constructive. Crypto insiders didn't. They say banks barely engaged. And the argument sounds technical, but it isn't. It's about one explosive question. Should crypto platforms be allowed to pay rewards on stablecoins, giving ordinary people a reason to move money out of banks and onto crypto rails? In the Oval Office, the president cut through the hesitation. "I'm a big crypto person," he said. Then came the warning, "If we don't do crypto, China's going to do it." That's not a slogan, that's leverage. Because if this shifts, it doesn't hit traders first. It hits where your savings sit, how the dollar holds power, and who sets the rules. And here's the part that changes how you see the entire fight. What happened next matters more than the meeting itself. This isn't just a stalled bill, it's the Clarity Act, and it's stuck because two systems are pulling in opposite directions. On one side, crypto firms argue they're being blocked from offering something simple: rewards on stablecoins held on their platforms. On the other, banks warn that allowing this could trigger what they call a massive flight of capital, with billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars leaving deposit accounts. The president publicly backed the bill, saying the U.S. has to move or fall behind. But here's the pattern that should make you pause. Every time new financial infrastructure threatens old gatekeepers, the fight gets framed as safety versus chaos, innovation versus stability. The real question isn't whether crypto grows, it's who avoids losing control as it does. Because if stablecoins start driving demand for dollars outside banks, the center of gravity shifts. And notice this, almost no one is asking what happens if the U.S. hesitates and China doesn't. The strongest claim made in that room was blunt. This isn't about crypto profits, it's about the dollar's survival. That's not speculation. Coinbase's chief legal officer said on camera that replacing the dollar with a Chinese central bank digital currency would be a disaster for America. He didn't stop there. He argued that stablecoins drive demand for U.S. dollars and help keep borrowing costs down as government debt rises. Those are facts stated directly. The implication is heavier. If demand for dollars increasingly comes from crypto rails instead of banks, power quietly moves with it. Another concrete detail matters here. Stablecoin deposits, he said, are backed dollar for dollar in short-term instruments, principally U.S. Treasuries. No lending, no fractionalization. That's the argument. Now notice what's missing. No one in that exchange produced evidence of stablecoins draining community bank deposits. No data, no numbers, just warnings. And when one side brings specifics and the other brings fear, the story starts tilting, because if the threat isn't the asset, but the delay, the entire debate flips. And that's where this begins to escalate. Once that framing lands, the conflict accelerates fast. Banks aren't just objecting to rewards. They're warning that allowing them normalizes something they've spent decades controlling: where yield lives. The comparison matters here. Traditional banks operate on a fractional system where deposits are lent back out, introducing risk the public rarely sees until it breaks. Crypto platforms are arguing the opposite on camera. Stablecoins, they say, are fully backed, sitting in short-term U.S. Treasuries, not recycled through the economy. That contrast shouldn't feel normal, but it's being treated as if it is. And that's the escalation. What used to be an experiment is now being discussed as infrastructure. What used to be fringe is being debated at the White House. This is how shifts happen quietly, not with collapse, but with precedent. Once rewards exist on crypto rails, matching them becomes political, not optional. And notice the speed. A bill stuck in the Senate. A summit convened overnight. Public warnings about hundreds of billions moving. That's pressure, not theory. Now watch closely, because this is where words and actions start to diverge in a way you can't unsee. Here's the contradiction that changes how this entire fight looks. Banks say stablecoin rewards are dangerous because they could pull money out of deposits. At the same time, crypto executives are pointing to a very specific fact. Billions of dollars are already sitting idle at the Federal Reserve. One figure cited on air was over $3 trillion parked there, not doing anything, while banks argue there isn't enough capital to go around. That gap matters, because while banks warn about instability instability, crypto platforms are arguing they're actually channeling demand straight into U.S. Treasuries, strengthening the dollar rather than weakening it. And then comes the line you can't rewind past. Stablecoin deposits, we're told, are backed dollar for dollar, while the traditional system relies on fractionalization. Words say safety. Structure says something else. And here's the flip. Critics accuse crypto of wanting rewards without regulation, yet the industry is openly pushing for federal oversight for the first time. That's not avoidance, that's an invitation. Notice what that implies. If crypto accepts supervision and still wins this argument, the banks lose their strongest defense. And once that happens, the pressure doesn't just stay in Washington, it spills outward fast. Then the story compresses into a mini crisis. First, the legislation itself splits into layers. Even if the Clarity Act stalls, another law already exists. The Genius Act is in force, and under it, stablecoin rewards are explicitly allowed. That means the fight isn't about whether rewards happen, it's about how far they spread. Second, Coinbase makes its ambition unmistakable. On camera, it describes itself as an everything exchange, moving into stock trading, prediction markets, direct deposit, AI-assisted advice, and 24/7 market access. That's not a product tweak. That's a parallel financial account forming in real time. Third, regulators are pulled in. Federal oversight of crypto spot markets, clear rules on which tokens fall under which agency, and protection for decentralized finance are all being negotiated at once. Too many moving parts, too little slack. This is what loss of control looks like. Not collapse, but acceleration. One law passes, another follows. Platforms expand before the rules fully settle. And here's the question that hangs over everything now. What happens if this continues faster than anyone can slow it down? Now shift the lens to where this actually lands. Not on executives or lawmakers, but on you. Because if stablecoins start offering rewards while banks push know-your-place limits, everyday behavior changes first. You don't need to believe in crypto ideology to respond to incentives. If one place pays and another doesn't, money moves. That's not theory. That's human behavior. And when that happens, the effects aren't abstract. It changes how quickly you can move money, what it costs, and who gets access. Community banks warn rural areas could be left behind. Crypto platforms counter that those communities are being reached for the first time. That's the clash. Two systems, both claiming to serve ordinary people with radically different tools. And here's the uncomfortable part. None of this requires you to opt in consciously. The system around you can shift without asking. New rails form. Old ones harden, and suddenly what felt optional becomes default. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. Because the most important changes never announce themselves loudly. They show up quietly in how your money behaves. And that leads to the question most coverage avoids entirely. This is where you have to stop reacting and look at the mechanism underneath. This isn't chaos, it's incentives lining up. Banks are built to protect deposits and manage risk through control. Crypto platforms are built to attract flows through speed, yield, and visibility. When stablecoins are backed by short-term U.S. Treasuries, every dollar that moves onto those rails still props up government debt. That's the quiet leverage. It keeps demand for dollars high without relying on traditional deposits. Meanwhile, politicians get to say they're defending innovation and competitiveness, regulators get a new domain to supervise, and platforms get legitimacy. Everyone gains something by moving forward, and almost no one is rewarded for slowing it down. That's why the conversation keeps returning to China. On air, it was stated plainly, China is offering a central bank digital currency with yield designed to push the yuan into global trade. That's not ideology, that's strategy. And once this becomes a race rather than a debate, guardrails tend to follow movement, not lead it. That's the unsettling insight. Systems don't pause to decide what's best. They respond to pressure, and the pressure here is already on. From here, the path forward splits, and neither option is clean. In one version, the Clarity Act passes. Crypto platforms gain clear federal oversight, stablecoin rewards expand, and the U.S. locks in private dollar-based rails before anyone else can. That keeps demand tied to U.S. treasuries and reinforces the dollar's role in global trade. But it also normalizes a parallel financial system that grows faster than banks can adapt. In the other version, the bill stalls. Banks succeed in slow flowing rewards. But the Genius Act stays in force, meaning stablecoin incentives don't disappear. They just concentrate. Innovation doesn't stop. It reroutes. Platforms keep expanding into stocks, prediction markets, and direct deposits while regulation lags behind reality. And here's the tension point. China doesn't need this debate to resolve. Its central bank digital currency already exists, already offers yield, already signals intent to displace the dollar. Delay helps one side more than the other. So watch what happens next. Not the speeches, not the press releases, but the sequencing, which rules move first, which incentives stay untouched. Because once the next step is taken, reversing it becomes political, not technical. And the next move is already forming. Here's the insight that ties all of this together. This isn't a fight about crypto versus banks. It's about who gets to define money before the definition hardens. The argument over stablecoin rewards looks narrow, but it's really a proxy battle over demand, control, and credibility. On one side, a system that has shaped behavior for decades by limiting yield and access. On the other, a system promising speed, transparency, and constant availability, backed directly by government debt. The outcome doesn't hinge on belief. It hinges on momentum. The president's warning keeps echoing for a reason. If we don't do it, China's going to do it. That line reframes everything, because once digital currencies start setting the terms of global trade, catching up isn't enough. You either shape the rails or you ride someone else's. This story isn't finished. It's just entering the phase where decisions become irreversible. If you want to understand how power moves before it's obvious, follow for the next layer of this analysis. The rules of money are being rewritten quietly, and the people who notice early always have an advantage.